hey there, one and all, wherever you happen to be. My name's Matt Stranik, and this is the first edition of this season of the Writers on Writing podcast and/or interview series, however you care to characterize it. And I've been reaching out in various ways to folks through social media and email, and in some cases, personal contact to bring to you some people that I greatly admire in terms of writing or music or cultural activities, creatively writ large, as it were. And for this first episode of this new year's series, I am absolutely stoked and thrilled and stoked, if you will, to be joined by none other than Jack Rabid. Perhaps that's not his given name at birth, but that is certainly the name that he has carved out for himself across the Big Takeover publication that's been running. We're going into year 46, if you can believe this, of the Big Takeover, published out of New York City and still running strong, published twice a year, if I'm not mistaken, if nothing's changed, in print with a whole lot of outstanding, I don't want to call it ancillary or extra content, but if you go to the website, you're going to see all kinds of digital exclusives. You're going to see recording sessions. You're going to see the Big Takeover radio show, which I strongly recommend. I was listening to that just earlier today myself. And as well, Jack has been a part of, whether playing drums or singing and drumming with, I can dare say, seminal New York hardcore band, even worse, if we can call them that, as well with the band Springhouse and Last Burning Embers, some 90s rock going on there and into the millennium. And I dare say still, in some cases, going strong, whether through reunions, reissues, and or new recordings. And so I don't know if we can possibly get to all of that. Boy, oh boy, between the Big Takeover site, which I strongly recommend you check out, between the radio presence, between the Discogs website for Jack, it's going to be all linked, never fear, on the contextualizing blog post that goes with this conversation. And I'm even going to tell you it's his birthday today. He's even taking time out on a birthday, which I won't be guilty of saying a number. You might want to, Jack, but
yeah, 39.
Again, there we go.
Me and Jack Benny. Jack Benny and I were both 39.
Fantastic.
And holding.
You heard it here first. And in the middle of a busy Monday here, the day after the Ides of March, couldn't be happier to have Jack. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Really grateful that you've responded to a absolute stranger's request from the East Coast of Canada, way, I guess, above you, and I won't say more easterly of you because you're situated in New York City. And thanks a lot for being here, sir.
Well, I'm sorry to be such a handful of things that need to be talked about, apparently, but I'm kind of a restless soul that way. I'm such a huge music fan. I guess I just invariably end up doing lots of different things within that realm, especially over 46 years like that. It's just inevitable, I guess. And thank you for having me. I don't want to be anything but grateful myself. It's not like I get a billion interview requests. So it's nice anybody wants to talk to me about what I've done. It's really, really quite humbly flattering.
Well, appreciate the appreciation, Jack. I have to tell you, and I'm sure this will be mentioned in the notes, we had a bit of a chat pre-recording. My initial contact with Jack in the first place was when I bought the absolutely fantastic, stellar, super duper split 12-inch vinyl, Hot Water Music, and Leatherface back in 1998. I got it as soon as it came out. I've been a huge Leatherface fan since I was 19 or 20 years old. And I went to see Leatherface play in Worcester, Massachusetts in 2000 on the tour that they did with Avail and Dillinger 4. And immediately after getting back, I actually put in an order. I ordered a whole lot of issues of the big takeover. And Jack very thoughtfully wrote back. He didn't just send the issues, he wrote this really personal letter, and he included some information about his band Springhouse, which had at one point been a touring entity. I don't know if that's still the case so much these days.
We just played
And
Los
you,
Angeles twice in November.
okay, well, fantastic. See, things that are going on decades ago are just continuing to recur, these creative endeavors.
Yeah,
And
great people
upon,
out there.
and
Very
yeah, well, you
speaking
ought
of
to.
humbly flattering.
And so going through these issues, I basically, you would sort of put in a note, sort of asking, which I didn't reply to because I was nervous and awkward, but it was sort of like, well, why did you choose these particular issues? Basically, I ordered anything that I could find that had the replacements or Paul Westerberg or Leatherface associated with it. And in so doing, by buying, a dozen or so issues over the years at that point or whatever it was, just going into those magazines, you have to appreciate the typical issue of the big takeover is no casual publishing endeavor. It's thick. I don't know, I haven't seen the latest issues in print. They're not around. I live in a small place, but where I used to live in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Backstreet Records, downtown Fredericton, the record store clerk was cool enough to just have a few copies going at all times of the current issue. And they come out twice a year. So they're big, they're thick, a lot of contributors, a lot of really thoughtful commentary. And because just it's, I guess, perhaps a function of being just a twice annual kind of publication, there's such a wide diversity of releases from things that are, I guess, mid to higher level within the Indian punk realm to, I guess, other kinds of artists and acts, which for somebody who's a cajillion kilometers away, or perhaps in a smaller market or outside the larger urban centers of the United States, they might be more under the radar. And so it's always been an act of discovery to open those pages and read some really thoughtful commentary, some really comprehensive interviews with some excellent, outstanding, interesting folks. And so to me, again, there's nobody I'd rather, I guess, start the interview series with for this year than somebody who's been doing these interviews for really almost as long as I've been alive. And again, I guess what I would say by way of leaning into a first question here, Jack, I mean, you've been doing this since you were in your teenage years anyway. I don't think I'm
High
naming
school,
and
yeah.
shaming any.
No,
Yeah.
I was in
So
high school when we began.
you came of age in Summit, New Jersey, if I'm not taking any liberties.
No, that's
Pretty
true.
pretty small town, pretty small city, within commuting distance. It looks like within an hour's drive of New York City,
Yeah.
and about give or take. I'm just going by what Google Maps has given out to me here. So if we're looking into the late 70s, early 80s, when you were kind of coming of age,
Mm.
when you're in your home environment, were your parents, were your folks, were your friends, were people in your immediate circle into music? Did you have folks who had the turntable with the music going? Did you have radio in your life? Were you into band or any other kinds of extracurricular involvements with these things? Were you a reader? Were you sort of a literary person? What kind of put you on the trajectory towards where you have ended up over the years?
Certainly a lot of factors involved in that, but I think to cut to the chase, it was my obsession with the Beatles when I was even in kindergarten and before kindergarten, nursery school age. I got a copy of the Chipmunks Sing the Beatles for my, I think, third Christmas. I'm the fourth of four children, and all four of us got Chipmunks records. But my three siblings got like On Top of Old Smoky and Home on the Range, and those are always the two songs I remember. There's 40 more like it, but for some reason those are the two that I always remember hearing on those Chipmunks records. And I got I Want to Hold Your Hand, and I saw her standing there and stuff like that. So I went crazy over this Chipmunks record, and a much older kid who lived next door to us heard me playing it one day because I just played it every day, and he hated it. He thought it was the worst thing he'd ever heard. And I said, well, how come you say that? It's my favorite record. I'm like 3 years old. Like I can't even remember this. I've heard this from other people's recollection. It's not a personal memory of mine. Like looking at pictures of you when you're 2. But apparently I said, this is my favorite record. How can you insult it? And he said, like, come to my house. I'll play you the real Beatle records. And if you've been listening to the Chipmunks for 3 weeks or whatever, then you hear the Beatles versions. It's basically punk rock, loud guitars and sexual energy and backbeat and crashing drums and all. The Chipmunks record didn't sound like that. So by the time I was 6, I had all their albums in 1968, and I joined the Beatles fan club. They were still a band.
Fantastic.
I still have all that stuff, and I could show you some of it if you'd like to see it. I'll here on the screen. That's not exciting or anything, but it says Jackie on it instead of Jack, because everyone called me Jackie when I was a little kid, as people do. And they sent me lots of opportunities to buy merch. They were way ahead of their time, largely photographs. But they sent me the Christmas flexi, and the next year they sent me the Christmas album, and which I still have, and lots of like mimeograph things. Like I thought I had their autographs because when I was in the late 60s, we didn't understand the concept of Xerox. It was a new technology. So I thought all 4 of them had autographed my letter from the New Jersey chapter of the Beatles fan club, It was their signatures. They were just, mimeographed, I guess you would have called it back then. And everyone knew what to buy me every Christmas and every birthday, like today. If this was 1967 or 68 today, I'd be getting like 3 things that are wrapped, and I'd look at them and go like, well, that's an album. That's a single, before you even unwrap it, right? Well, what else could it be, right? In that shape. And of course, it would be a Beatle this or a Beatle that. Every time I had $2.99, I'd go to Corvettes with my mother. She'd drive me there. And I didn't realize this till years later, but she was paying the sales tax. She didn't tell me. And every time there was an article about the Beatles in the Star Ledger, which was our newspaper, she'd cut it out and hand it to me. Everyone knew. It was just a total Beatles obsessive. And of course, the Beatles are like 15 bands in one. So if you like the Beatles and you like all the Beatles, you really have a lot more wide-ranging taste than if you like some other bands. So I got this really nice template, this really nice foundation as a rock and roll fan. And when you're young, you often gravitate to the fastest, hardest, most exciting stuff. So in very short order, I wanted to know who R. Penniman was and C. Berry. I'd look at the records at the songwriters. Oh, they didn't write that one. This one doesn't say Lennon and McCartney. This one says C. Holly. Or, sorry, B. Holly, So you have a lot of work cut out for you as a small child in the days without internet. But I'd ask everybody who could tell me about anything. I'd meet people who were 20 years old, and they'd say, "Hey, kid, what are you doing with that Beatle album?" And then I'd cajole them for a half an hour. That was my internet. Some guy who had a Beatle record. A couple of our babysitters, believe it or not, one named Jan Richardson. She was a Mormon. So in like 1968, she had to renounce the Beatles. It was really weird. And she gave me all of her Beatles stuff. It was all these like magazine clippings and stuff. It was like a gold mine to a 6-year-old. And I remember distinctly one of our other babysitters, I wanted to play her a Beatles album because she said she liked the Beatles. I mean, who didn't in 1969 if they're 17 years old, right? A girl, no less. But I said, well, I have this record I want to play you called Revolver. I think it's amazing. Of course, it's the American version. I didn't know back then there was an English version. But she goes, no, do you have the new album, Abbey Road? I'm like, yeah, I just got it. I haven't played it yet. I just got it. I'd really like to play you this record. She says, I want to hear Abbey Road. I was 7 years old. Oh, okay. Well, we'll listen to that together. No problem.
So musical fandom really is hardwired into your DNA
Yeah.
almost.
The scrapbook I started in '69, my wife kids me, is the first issue of Big Takeover. Mind you, I'm 7 years old, so I misspell everything uh, in my little 7-year-old chicken scratch. I talk about the gig at Shea Stadium, which was when I was 4.5, and I recount that I asked my mother to take me at the age of 4.5 to Shea Stadium. And I say, well, she wouldn't take me because she said the girls were screaming. Too much screaming. But I know she would have taken me if those girls weren't screaming. It's really kind of like absolutely accidentally charming, all these misspellings. Like I spelled guitar gutter. Apparently I couldn't spell GUI. So it was guitar, GUTAR. Microphone with a K. It's pretty hilarious, actually. I'm glad I still have it. My mother held on to it for years.
Well, and your parents, your family members being supportive of this. I
No,
mean,
actually, not really. My parents
yay,
hated rock and roll. Couldn't stand it.
not even. They just didn't have space for it in their lives.
Well, they listened to a lot of Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass and Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra, Perry Como. That was their kind of music. Because my dad was born in '29 and my mom 32, so they were already in their later 20s by the time Elvis hits. Their taste
Right.
was completely formed. They thought that was a bunch of like crazy stuff, tuneless, boring, bad lyrics. There was absolutely zero in it for them at all. I'm the last generation that there really is a generation gap, a widespread one. Like where it's really not expected for your parents to like rock and roll. Those who came of age with Elvis on, or hipper black parents, I guess, earlier than that, if you were into Big Joe Turner and R&B and boogie woogie and hillbilly records, yeah, maybe. But for white people like my parents, they would be more like Elvis in '56, '57, where they first become aware of it, or maybe the couple of Bill Haley hits might have let them know there was something coming along that they don't like. But on the other
Well,
hand, my mother, she didn't hate the Beatles like they didn't think they were the devil's music. We'd gotten past that part. Plus, they weren't black, so there wasn't any pressure on parents to hate the Beatles the way there was if your kid came home with a Little Richard record. Flamboyant, homosexual, crazy guys screaming black R&B records. That was probably a little harder for white parents in the '50s, but it didn't stop the kids from buying the records.
absolutely.
Take this, mom and dad. I think this stuff is awesome, and I'm not racist. And so, if you want to think this is the devil's music, I'll just play it when you're not around, or at my friend's house, because this stuff is awesome. It
Well,
really is. You listen to
it
Little Richard
puts you
now, it's awesome. Just
it puts
awesome.
you in the moment. It's impossible to escape a moment when Little Richard, when Tutti Frutti is in the air around you. You're pretty dialed into it. Either you're with it
You're young.
or you're trying to tune it out. So,
Well, it was a hit, a minor hit. It was a bigger hit for Pat Boone, but it was a minor hit, and it was getting some airplay on white stations, so white kids were starting to hear it. That's the crossover part where it isn't Big Joe Turner anymore, or even Bill Haley. People start to wear black artists. Fats Domino starts getting some hits outside of the black charts, as well as Little Richard, like "Ain't That a Shame" and "Blueberry Hill." Those were hits on the white charts too. So it starts to cross over, and that's where the white parents start getting scared. But by the time I'm buying Beatles records, they're in suits. They're a bunch of good-looking white guys singing, "I'll give you all my love. That's what I'll do." It's not doesn't seem anywhere near as threatening as "Good golly, Miss Molly, you sure like the ball," or that Big Joe Turner song, "Shake, Rattle, and Roll." I'm like a one-eyed cat peeping in the seafood store. I mean, that's That's a little further down the line, if you're a parent worried about, influences on your children in the 1950s.
Expanding your horizons beyond what may have been socially or culturally fathomable, right? Back in the day.
But I have to say this, I was not a visionary. The Beatlemania was real. I wasn't like a screaming girl chasing after them or anything or going. I didn't get to go to their concert and scream at them. I don't think I would have anyway. Why do you scream? I want to hear the music. Stop screaming. I can't hear. Maybe my mother was right. I shouldn't go. But their music was ubiquitous in a way I've never seen in my whole life since. Obviously, I was interested because they were the band I cared about. But you go in the farm and you heard the Beatles. You walk down the street, you'd hear it coming out of somebody's car. You go into the grocery store, more Beatles. It was Beatles, 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 Beatles all the time. You didn't even have to turn on the radio to hear them constantly. And again, I would always notice them. There was a rule in my house that if we pulled into the garage and the Beatles song was still playing, everybody else would get out of the car and I'd stay there. And they taught me how to turn the ignition off when the song finished, especially if it was Hey Jude in '68, because no one had heard a song that long in their lives, right? So the song would start, as we're pulling on our block on Harvey Drive in Summit. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be here another 7 minutes because there's just no chance that I'm leaving this car until that song finishes playing. Even though I had the record, I could have just turned it off and put it on when I got in. It didn't occur to me. The song's on the radio. I'm listening to it. So lucky me. I was completely surrounded everywhere I went with my favorite band. And when I would talk about them incessantly, people knew what I was talking about.
And so clearly formative in terms of, you mentioned this little newsletter kind of thing you put together when you were a small child. Were you?
While we're talking, I'm gonna go get it. But keep
Yeah,
speaking.
perfect. That would be awesome. I just have to ask, were you a literary kid whatsoever? I mean, what was the interest in writing as a vehicle to share your feelings or thoughts or just information for others about this stuff? I mean, what caused you to pick that up? Because a lot of Beatles fans over the years, a lot of fans of punk music and the kinds of indie kind of artists that would appear in a typical issue of the Big Takeover, a lot of people are passionate about that music. Not everybody's going to go to the trouble to write about it, share their opinions, do interviews and the like. So I guess I'm just sort of wondering what sort of was the impetus for that aspect of it for you as a young person.
Well, it's really just a joke from my wife that this is the first issue of Big Takeover because I wasn't producing something anybody else would read. It's just something a 7-year-old does. You get excited about something and you start doing a painting of it or a I don't know, a paper airplane, whatever you're doing. You're creative and you get excited. Like this is from Jan Richardson. Beatles say we still talk with our dead manager.
Oh,
thank you, Jan, for cutting that out and giving it to me. But this is my scrapbook. I used the cover of a Life magazine from November 7th, 1969. This is what spurred me. I liked this cover. I mean, they really were that ubiquitous. They'd be on the cover of Life. They'd be on the cover of Time. They'd be in the Star Ledger. Anything so much they did that would be massive news.
It really was a cultural moment.
Yeah. Here's my drawings of the things used in the new single, Hey Jude. There's Paul's mouth was to sing with. There's the gutter. Drums, piano, microphone.
Microphone.
I really am 7 years old, in other words. And let's see, page 2 and 3 is about the supposed Paul is dead thing.
Right.
Oops, sorry. You can see my 7-year-old chicken scratch there. It's pretty pathetic.
But yet it's almost a template. It's like a proto version.
Yeah.
And
the second word is the theme, and I spelled it THEAM. the theme that Paul is dead was for publicity. But I have found out that, well, for instance, INSTINSE, that OPD badge he picked up in Canada. It means Ontario Police Department. Like I'm already at 7, demythologizing. It doesn't mean officially pronounced dead. It means Ontario Police Department. Thank you very much. And
But again, I have kids and you're a dad. I've seen as an educator what I would call, just from what you're sharing with me here, some pretty higher order thinking and some pretty higher order creative output coming out through just this kind of presentation.
yeah. Well, I was going for it, but I had no ambition to be a writer. I never thought anybody would ever look at this ever again. It was just for my own purposes. Maybe I'd show someone, come over, like, look, I did this funny thing. I really love this band. You should check them out. I'll play you their record. But this is that way I talk about. Here's them at Shea Stadium, cut out again. I think Time Magazine, maybe it was Life. They were everywhere. Really, you can see those what constituted their amplifier stacks, trying to cut through all the engine noise of girls screaming. And you can see the girls screaming in front of them. But in any case, this is where I talk about screaming. And I said, to me, I seem to wish that I was not there, and that wish came true. Even though THOW, I like the Beatles, it doesn't mean anything. I could not enjoy it. INJOY, with all those girls screaming. I could not hear. So even at 7, I was, like, shut up! I want to hear the music. It's like when 3 people near you start singing along with the band really badly. You want to tell them, like, I'm glad you love the song as much as I do, but I kind of want to hear them sing it. I pay that kind of
were
money.
you involved in creating music at all during these years? Did you take piano lessons?
No,
Did you
I
do?
fell in love with Ringo Starr and decided I wanted to be a drummer because he looked like he was having the most fun up there. You'd see them on the Ed Sullivan Show, or you'd see some film of them playing because they were that famous. And again, they were a band around us. They were not broken up yet. The rest of my life, they've been a broken up band and a historic thing. But at the time they were a functioning band releasing new records all the time. So here's some of my official Beatle fan club stuff.
Whoa.
So there's their famous logo with the apple.
I am so impressed. Well, first of all, by this memorabilia in the first place. And then
I'm glad
second
my
of all,
mother held on to it. This is page 28, by the way, of my scrapbook. I'm glad you have video that you can see this stuff.
Totally. The fact that this still exists as a physical thing you can share and present to others, as opposed to just kind of having a memory of it. Again,
Yeah.
I'm just super impressed that you've managed to hold on to it.
With all my drawings too. I have no talent as an artist, so when I show you this, it's not to show you how good a drawing I did. It's just emblematic of the passion that I had for them and their music. It was just so exciting. I wish there was some way, that people either younger than me or older than me that for whatever reason didn't experience it, that I could just take them all back there. Or I wish I was older so I even better understood what it is that I was excited about. I was so excited I took a picture of Paul McCartney when he was on TV. The things you do when you're 7, right? Well, how does this constitute a picture of Paul McCartney? It doesn't. But there he is.
I found trying to describe, for instance, I have a couple of teenagers, trying to describe to them what the world was like before ubiquitous online and wireless communication, where everything was analog. And so everything was that much more precious in terms of how you had the manifesting physical memorabilia of it, right? So that picture you took, it was, sure, you're going to have a photograph you can look at later, but it was your photograph. You executed something off of something that you cared about and turned it into something you could touch and possibly share with others, right? In a very meaningful way.
My dad told me that every time the Beatles would come on Ed Sullivan or some other program, that my face would just turn into this abject like awe. Like, oh. Because we're only 6 years old once in our lives. Even my kids are older than that now, but I would look at them very intently when they were listening to music they liked and see if there was elements of what I was doing in them. And they're both big music fans, so I passed it along. I used to play my son Jim the Beatles cartoon all the time because I got tired of watching even Yo Gabba Gabba. I got tired of watching Paw Patrol and the Backyardigans and stuff like that. I'm like, maybe this is something we can agree on that we'll both like more. And fortunately, they hadn't taken them off of YouTube yet, so we had access to the entire catalog of Beatles cartoons I watched when they were actually broadcast on Saturday mornings in the late 60s. I used to set my alarm to watch the Beatles cartoon early Saturday morning. And sometimes I'd go back to bed and half an hour later when it was done if I was still tired. I could not miss the Beatles cartoon. So in a way, I was able to kind of hook my son into the Beatles thanks to the Beatles cartoon. They were largely not on YouTube anymore by the time Caroline came along, sadly, but we found some bootleg ones and showed her those. The Beatles are a fantastic foundation for any kind of music fan. Their use of melody and harmony and their creative spark means you just never get bored of their music. I can easily get bored of the Rolling Stones apart from the more adventurous records they made in the late 60s when they were trying different things like Paint It Black or the whole of the Satanic Majesties record. But once they just get back to playing like, 3-chord shuffle rock like they do, it's every song starts to sound like Brown Sugar, and Brown Sugar already sounded like something else they'd done. You know what I mean? The Beatles were much more creatively restless throughout their entire 7-year recording career. And even in their solo records, even though I don't like them as much. So it's a great foundation. Let me just say really quickly, because I haven't answered your question, and that's bad of me. The publication itself, with all this falderall about what I was doing as a grade school kid, is a complete accident. It's not really a product of this. It's not really a product of saying I want to be a writer, because this is a show about writing, right? I didn't want to be a writer. I'm not sure even now, after doing it 46 years, I want to be a writer. I never liked writing. It was not an ambition of mine. It was not a goal. It was never something I foresaw that I'd spend my life doing. It was totally a byproduct, though. And this is where this Beatles scrapbook thing comes back in, of just being an absolute gonzo fan, being completely moved by the ability of music to express what I feel in my life and to excite me even apart from that. When I've been depressed, I turn to music. When I've been happy, like most people, I turn to music. Have you ever gone to a wedding where there's no music? What party is there, that you think is really good where there's no music playing? The people always have music when they feel happy. It's there's no culture in the world that people don't sing and dance. Historically, even you can go back 3,000 years, and you don't even have to go to Egypt or something that we know lots about. I'm sure if you went to Mongolia in 4,000 BC, people were singing and dancing. It's how we feel alive.
Fundamental aspect of the human condition across millennia, as long as we've had the capabilities that we have as a species, right?
Yeah. And that's why, even though it's really convenient for me to say this, I don't believe there's such thing as a music nerd. I don't think there's such thing as a music geek. And you can nerd out on anything to the point where you're so pedantic and so focused on things you miss the point. Okay, that I'm willing to extend to anything.
Right.
Even something really vibrant and alive like history. History is really important, and yet you can meet people who are like, you're missing the forest for the trees.
Right.
You're so hepped up on, like, I don't know, battle tactics that you forget the importance of the outcome of the battle itself, to history in general, even apart from the war. But that registered, there is no such thing to me as being too passionate about music, because it really is warp and woof of the human condition. So here I found myself as a writer. I really wanted to be a musician. Like I said, I've been playing the drums since I was in like second grade. And I even joined the drum department of my grade school in fourth grade. They had tryouts, and I made the grade out of like 20 kids. There was like 5 of
Awesome.
us that made it.
And
But
did you stick with it?
they teach you orchestra drums, though. I had to read music, and I had to sit there with my snare drum going like this, or my bass drum going like this, or my triangle going ding, 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 ding. You have a part, you'd play it, even timpani, even though I didn't read notes in the Western scale. I had somebody write them out for me. This is a B, this is an A flat, this is a C. So then I'd memorize the part doing that, going C, B flat, A, kind of like people do at Guitar Hero 40 years later, until you just kind of memorize the part and you don't even need to read the sheet music anymore. Same thing with bells. I played bells in the orchestra up through 9th grade, and I didn't read any notes. So I wrote the notes on the bells themselves. This is an A, this is a C, this is a
And
B
so in
minor.
9th grade, you decided you had taken as much from that as you could and you opted out, or
In
I
9th grade, I
mean,
got into punk rock. Short answer.
and that's kind of where I was perhaps going with that.
That's
Was
also
that after the Beatles? Because for better or for worse, at least from the outside looking in, it's hard to talk about the big takeover without talking about punk and alternative and indie music over the
yeah.
past nearly 5 decades.
It's
It's
dead.
something that,
And it's the
yeah.
big
So,
bang in my life, no question. No question. It's impossible, as you say, not to put in context whatever value my work has, and I can't say it has any. That's not for me to do. But to the extent that anybody's liked anything I've done as a DJ or a musician or a journalist or publisher, it's all down to punk rock. There never would have been any of that. I loved playing the drums, but I couldn't see myself getting into a normal rock band. It sounded like pie in the sky. If you're buying Elton John singles when you're 14, you don't think like, oh, I'm going to get in a band. I'm going to play Madison Square Garden. I'm going to play Dodger Stadium. It's like you might as well say I'm going to be the shortstop for the Blue Jays. Yeah,
so,
good luck with that.
so was it a matter then of, as the mid and late 70s sort of first wave kind of bands? I mean, in New York City, I mean, you had the Ramones, you had the Heartbreakers, you had all this really original artists. When they would sort of come out to where you were and you'd go see them play, or you'd go into the city and see them at those storied venues in real time as the early years of what became known as punk rock started to happen? I mean, what was your, I guess, personal way into that sort of musical subculture, if you will?
It's the most weird quirk of coincidence I've ever encountered in my entire life. But apart from the Velvet Underground and Lou Reed being more or less the first practitioner that we might call punk rock, with the
Right.
Velvet Underground predating the Stooges and the MC5, although there were other people doing things vaguely along the same lines, like I don't know, the 13th Floor Elevators or the Sonics or whatever. It's really hard to delineate where punk starts and
It's
like
true.
crazy garage rock and weird psychedelia and all the rest ends. But having said that, the first Velvet Underground gig was at Summit High School in 1965, fifth on the bill. And that is bizarre beyond words. I was a mile and a half down the road, probably in my crib sleeping, age 3. But the joke has always been like that by osmosis, that our little Summit contingent all somehow had this infect us in our cribs, fast asleep, listening to a lullaby or something. I don't know how it happened. It's just so bizarre. But apart from that, yes, all the gigs we went to were either in New York City, with the exception of some of the bands that would play there would play the Show Place in Dover, New Jersey, maybe 7 towns over. And as we got older, we'd make it down to out by Philadelphia. There was a club down there called the Electric Circus in New Jersey, but that's really Philadelphia, in the same way that going to Maxwell's in Hoboken to a Summit kid is like going into New York. You just don't cross the river. So pretty much every gig we went to was New York. And I didn't know none of us knew any of those bands existed you just mentioned, because we were in ninth grade in Summit listening to classic rock radio. It wasn't classic rock yet, but that kind of sound, and listening to top 40 radio like every other 15-year-old. So we knew who Elton John was, but the Ramones might as well have been, your cousin's bar band. That if they weren't in the charts, you don't know them. And this is the part of every interview where I have to mention Dave Stein and Jeff Hutchinson, two of my best friends in Summit. Dave Stein had been my best friend since kindergarten. He and I were inseparable and listened to Beatle records all the time, and
Awesome.
played sports together. And, we're just like best friends. And he had other best friends. He was that kind of guy. He was my best friend. He was a bunch of other people's as well, because he's that sort of fellow. He's dead now, sadly.
Sorry to hear that.
His friend, Jeff Hutchinson, who was on a street hockey team with us. That's how I knew Jeff, was principally through the street hockey team that Dave had invited him to join. So he was kind of Dave's friend. Well, Jeff got into David Bowie. So he's really the catalyst in the story. And then he ropes his girlfriend, Janet Whitehouse, and his friend Dave Stein to check out Bowie with him. And Bowie in 77, he wasn't like safe entertainment like he is now. He was like this weirdo, this dangerous weirdo. I'd seen the Aladdin Sane cover in the record store at Corvette's. I'm like, look at that crazy idiot. Who would do that? You're 14 years old. Like, why are you doing that for, you moron? What are we supposed to do, you moron? It's like Animal House. But they tried to get me into Bowie, and I resisted for a long time, for at least a month. And then Dave just said, I can't take this anymore. I'm just going to lend you one of his records. And he gave me Changes One Bowie. It was the new Greatest Hits album. And he insisted I listen to it. And such was my respect for Dave. I said, oh, okay. I'll listen to the stupid record. I know I'm not going to like it. Yeah. I know I'm not going to like it, but okay, if this is the only way you're going to stop. And I listened to it every day and hated it every day. And this went on for a week. I've always had to tell this story because it's like you have these epiphanies in life. They really do happen to you if you can remember them accurately and you don't sugarcoat them. The non-sugarcoating for me is how much I hated that record every time I play it. I thought it was a bunch of baloney. And then about after a week of this, I said, well, wait a minute. Why, if I hate it so much, do I play it every day? Dave isn't here to check up on me. What am I doing it to report to him that I really did try so I can tell him, fuck off, basically? I must actually like this. What that can't be, and then it's like, oh crap, I guess I really do like this. Oh no. What's happening? I can't take this. I was really unhappy about liking it. Because you're 15.
And then down the rabbit hole you go.
Yeah, it was really Alice in Wonderland ever since then. Ever since that day. I look at it like it's something that happened to me, not something I did. It was just this thunderbolt. If you can remember the way you were as a ninth grader, not just a middle schooler. We were still in middle school in ninth grade. It was weird in Summit. But just like the only things you care about, like I cared about sports. I cared about playing sports with my friends and having pals that all, we all liked normal things. We talked about the Yankees or the Grammys or, or what movies were cool, or just like every other 15-year-old. Suddenly I became obsessed with this guy that none of my friends liked, other than Dave and I guess Jeff, who I didn't know that well. And okay, I'm all in. I got immersed fast. I had a lot of albums to catch up on. And the next one I got was Low and Heroes. And you listen to side 2 of those are weirder still. Like the weirdest song on Changes One Bowie is John, I'm Only Dancing, because of its weird ambiance and the homoerotic lyrics. And it was like everything I'd never seen in a music song. And then you hear Low and Heroes, you're like, okay, this is even way weirder than that at age 15. And no precedent for it in your life or your peer group, or even in suburban New Jersey, as opposed to like Oshkosh or something. Just like, I can't believe this guy gets away with this stuff. You can do this on record. You can make a song like, Breaking Glass or Warzawa. Why would you do that? But I'm kind of strangely attracted to it. I suddenly realized I was attracted to unique things, to things that were unlike what other people were doing and were not made to fit in. It's really a crazy epiphany, and it's kind of exciting. It's still exciting to me this day. To this day, I hear a record once in a while. I go, I've never heard anything like that. Or it's kind of like other things I've heard, but it's taking it another direction. Like that song Geese did on Saturday Night Live, the second one, where he keeps shouting that there's a bomb in his car. Here it is, almost 50 years later, I still get off on that. Like, yeah, go for it. Get extreme. Don't be polite. They should have done it first on Saturday Night Live instead of second. They should have hit middle America with that. This just caterwauling kind of Sonic Youthy, avant-garde thing with him screaming there's a bomb in his car. Great. Shake people up. These records took me up.
It's cool that there's still space for that, because rock is one of these formats now that the death of rock music seems to keep every 10 or 15 years. Like, nah, it's so over now. But then you have these moments where a band like Geese, who I've heard of most recently, or certain other acts over the years, they kind of manage to punch through and almost not give it a second wind, but kind of remind you, okay, there's still younger people who are gravitating towards some of this kind of sound, something within this tradition, and kind of making it their own, making it fresh, as it were, right?
Because it's really open-ended. And it's been going since like the 40s, like some of those hillbilly records and bluegrass records and country records, they're part of the antecedents. Yeah, I listen to Bessie Smith from the 30s. I don't see it being all that much different than some of the new bands, what they come up with now. Give me a Pigfoot and a bottle of gin, Great. It really is kind of just more music. When we say rock music, we have this really kind of like very specific thing in mind of people banging at guitars now. But even until Chuck Berry revolutionized that, we used to think the sax and the piano were the main rock and roll instruments, right? I mean, there were guitars on those records, but they weren't the featured thing. And a lot of the bass back then used to be stand-up bass, more like jazz. So my personal feeling is like, let people say rock is dead all the time. It's dead as a commercial farce. 17-year-old kids are buying like rap pop records like they've been for the last 30 years. And, bad overproduced pap of the Britney Spears variety hasn't changed much, for the last 30 years. They're just new girls singing it instead of her. It's all over stylized, computer programmed, not very human sounding, too perfect, beat centric by machine. The thing about rock is it's usually made by people. You can use machines incorporated, but it's a very human expression. I think even the fact that jazz hasn't gone away, even though that's way more niche than rock, tells me that it's a real idiom. It's not just for, wine and cheese snobs. It's like, oh, I only like jazz. It's a real form of music. And there's still people making jazz even that doesn't sound like, they're trying to make the next Dizzy Gillespie record or something. Music is music. If it has validity, it'll continue. But yeah, that's how I got started. Is my friends insisted I come along with their journey, and pretty soon we had the Summit contingent. There was like 7 of us piling into the Erie Lackawanna train, heading into the city, because from Bowie we found out about Iggy Pop and Lou Reed because he was working with them, and Brian Eno, and from that we heard that they used to be in these older bands that were considered proto-punk because they're the godfathers of this new thing called punk rock. I mean, it's that naive because you'd never heard it on the radio. So we're like, oh, well, what's this punk rock stuff? Maybe we'd like that too. Couldn't find a Stooges record. Couldn't find a Velvet Underground record. Hopelessly out of print. Nobody's selling them to the used bin. All you could find were the new Iggy Pop and Lou Reed records. So it was a very gradual descent. But once we started getting into New York and those record stores, we started finding, punk rock records because a lot of them were major label distributed, like the Ramones and the Talking Heads, and Television, and for me, the Saints. Those first 2 Saints albums, which I got in the cutout bin for $2.99 each, they just completely rocked my world. I'd never heard anything that exciting in my life. I still am a massive Saints fan. There's a There's a massive Saints interview in my current issue because they just did that reunion tour.
They did with Mark Arm from Mudhoney, right?
Yeah, it was the first time ever. So when I say reunion, I mean it. The band broke up in '78, and this is the first time there's been a that version of the Saints has played
Right.
anywhere in the world, let alone their native Australia, and we got to see it here. My good late friend Chris Bailey had a version of the Saints that he did for years and toured here, but that was really a solo vehicle where he appropriated the name, much as I liked it. It had zero, not even 1%, had zero to do with the original band from 73 to 78 that managed to release 2 albums in North America on Sire. So that's suddenly we were this massive punk rock fans, and we are taking the train in before we could even drive, and we were going to see Johnny Thunder's Heartbreakers. My first gig was Talking Heads with XTC. You could do that in 1978 at the age of 16, and it was so exciting seeing the Clash. When I was 17, I can't explain it to you how powerful that was. It was just even having had the records, I was not prepared for what I saw with the Clash and Sam and Dave and the Undertones.
And so that personal aspect, that personal component, trying to get closer to that, that carries into wanting to share that in whatever way through a publication. I assume you were perhaps playing in some groups yourself at that point, outside of the orchestral kind of music you had been doing in school.
Well, remember, I gave that up in 9th grade.
Yep.
That was boring, playing "Oh What a Beautiful Morning" or whatever, with oboes and things.
And so did you and your pals pick up some guitars and basses and start
I'd been drumming all along. I had gotten my own kit, and I'd learned how to. I had drum lessons for about 2 months, and the only thing the guy taught me that was useful was he saw, oh, you want to play a kit instead of this, orchestral drums. We'll put a little kit together for you, and I'll show you the basics. And he wanted me to be like Carl Palmer. He wanted me to be like a jazz drummer. This guy, his name was Chap Ostrander. He was a good guy, but he was a little frustrated with me because I wasn't interested in playing like jazz drumming. I didn't care about accented or syncopated triplets was what he was trying to teach me, and I didn't care. I still don't care about syncopated triplets. I would never make a good jazz drummer because you have to care to be a musician. I hear that stuff. I go, that's really great. You can do that. I don't want to do that. I admire that you can do it, but I don't have that kind of passion. So, I did have him. He says, well, you're a Beatles fan. Do you have a copy of Sgt. Pepper? And I said, yes. He says, well, put on the Sgt. Pepper reprise. Oh, okay. So, I stick the needle on and he goes, listen really carefully. We didn't know it was Paul, but Paul goes 1, 2, 3, 4. And then Ringo comes in by himself. No band, just drums. So you're not distracted by any guitar or bass or singing or anything. Just. And then the band comes in and he picks up the needle. I don't want to hear the rest of the song. He goes, no, you don't. We have business here.
This is what you need right here.
Yeah,
this is the prescription for you.
If you can play that, you can play like 98% of rock, and that's why I find it boring. That's what he said to me. But he was right. He's telling you the truth. If I could teach you that in a week, and I probably could, now you can play not necessarily well. You'll still
You're going to get where you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, you can put on the Sounds of Silence, the one where they grafted the drums on, which is what I did, because I could really make out those drums well, and they're simple. So I put on the Sounds of Silence, and I play along with the Hal Blaine or whoever it was recorded that drum part, grafted onto the folk original. And then I'd turn it up so loud that I could hear it over my playing, and I would play along to that because it was a very rudimentary beat and no fills. The fills will have to come later. And other Beatles songs that I liked, I would do that. And so from 4th or 5th grade on, I could play a drum beat. And then I would add on to that. And when punk came along, I would play along the Hanging Around by the Stranglers. Because Jet Black's drumming, again, very rudimentary, very few fills. But even the little fills he does, I've said this recently, it's like, did it. and that was above my pay grade at 15. But I'd play along. When I got to that, I'd try to give it a try, and 15 or 20 times I'd fuck it up. Like terrible. But by the 15th time, okay, that's not really that hard. You just have to do it a little crisper. It's more like,
Right.
It's like a little faster. It's a little more as opposed to like It's just speed it up a little bit and throw it in a little quicker. And so I taught myself basically how to drum to punk rock by playing along with the records. And eventually I was able to play Fish by the Damned when I was 19. I thought I'd gone to graduate school. It took me a lot of tries to play.
I was going to then kind of sort of moving forward in terms of your life trajectory. At some point, you made within those early kind of formative years, your late adolescence, your early adulthood, you end up at New York University, as per your Facebook, and you completed a program of study through
economics major.
Economics.
Yes.
Okay. And that was with aspirations to having sort of a straight so-called career in terms of working within the financial industries, or how did that end up feeding into what you do now, or is it just utterly unrelated?
It's utterly unrelated, except that I maintain a steady job. I account for our finances. I fundraise for the magazine by selling ads. I keep a close eye on the expense sheet from the printer and other assorted expenses that you accrue by doing a print publication and a website. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't unhelpful. I even took 2 accounting classes at NYU, although I don't do straight accounting. I just do like the sort of accounting that balances a checkbook.
Okay.
But I did wear a suit and tie for 4 years when I graduated and worked at New York Life Insurance.
Okay.
And got promoted to supervisor because when you're in college, you can say, "Well, I'm a college student," and I had cheap rent in the East Village, but then I had student loans to pay, and I had to come up with some funding for my rent and food. So it was inevitable I was going to do something. I'd already done music for 7 years by the time I graduated, so I wasn't under any illusion that punk rock was going to pay any bills. And I wasn't into punk rock in 1985. I wouldn't have called it that. I would have just called it indie rock, because by the time hardcore came along, it killed punk rock for me. A little later than some of the early adapters, like my hero, one of my biggest heroes, who's a good friend of mine, Vale out in San Francisco, who was the publisher of Search and Destroy magazine, and for the last 45 years or so, Research. He's well known on most college campuses to this day. Bye, Caroline. Hi. I'll see you later at like 5:30. Vale was one of those guys who gave up on punk rock in '79, having been one of the first guys on the scene. He saw the Ramones when they played a little cafe in San Francisco for like 25 people. One of those guys. For him, by the earliest stirrings of hardcore, he was out of there. It's like what was really great is not anymore. For Howard Devoto of the Buzzcocks, it was January '77. He was done with punk rock by then. He said, what was once unhealthily fresh is now a clean old hat. And then Foreign Magazine. After 14 Buzzcocks gigs and 1 single. So your tolerance will vary, but ultimately I think if you're an early punk rocker and hardcore comes along and turns it into kind of a juvenile, constricted, non-multi-form, non-open-ended thing with just people crashing into each other and slam dancing and stuff, you're just like, this has no appeal for me anymore. The intellectual variety of it and the musical variety of it is largely lost to me. Even though I loved a few of the early hardcore bands, but it got really repetitive fast.
You maintained, though, an interest in music because you were such a passionate fan. You maintained running this publication and continuing to grow it and to bring it out. You were still playing music while all this was going on.
And going to college and then working. I used to go to Springhouse rehearsals in my suit and take off the jacket and take off the tie and switch out.
So I was just for comparison, I was looking it up, and I mean, the big takeover's been running now, and maybe this owes something to the fact that you've managed to have a level of autonomy where you are personally responsible for the logistics and for the advertising and for
Yeah,
sort of
and
keeping it.
accountable too. When people send me advertising money, they trust me that their ad is going to appear, that I won't just run off to Mexico and drink margaritas with it.
Well, and for instance,
Yeah.
Maximum Rock and Roll, this venerable publication, I mean, you've been going for quite a while longer. Their print run ended, 5, 6, 8 years ago, whatever it was.
I was in the
And
first 14 issues of that. I think it was, might be 15.
okay.
I was the only non-hardcore voice in it. And I warned them that if they had me as one of their columnists, that's what I was going to do, because I was already disillusioned by 83. And they said they were fine with that. So I was basically the resident crank, pissing on everybody else's parade for those early issues. And my last column was how Maximum Rock and Roll were part of the problem. That was my farewell column. I said, I've actually been leading up to this for a long time. And Jeff Bale and Tim Yohannan wrote rebuttal column. They actually printed my column. I respect them for that. Basically lambasting them for perpetuating this problem, for perpetuating what I thought was an anti-intellectual, constricted pop movement. And
And so,
they wrote rebuttals and basically took me to task, saying, like they didn't agree with any of it. And then I think 5 years later, Jeff Bale, his final column was entitled "Jack Rabid Was Right." So never for Tim. Tim went to the grave, being an indefatigable hardcore guy. But Jeff Bell came to see things my way 5 years later or so.
and so I guess I have to ask then, I mean, is it your personal sensibility of what independent and passionate music is about that has sort of kept the publication, the big takeover,
Yeah.
going for all these decades?
I,
And
yeah, I appreciate that. I think you used the word hero for me earlier. I don't feel heroic. I don't want to sound like I'm a hero. I'm just doing my part. I like playing team sports better than individual sports. I was a good tennis player as a kid, but I got no satisfaction. Trophies I have over there, they stare back at me as meaningless. The team trophies I have, those are the ones I care about. Even if I had a bad game in the championship game or something, like the fact that I contributed to the team during the course of the season, it's great. Even if we didn't win
well,
the championship, team sports is great that way. You make good friends and you all, try to be good teammates. I
and
just try
that
to
is
contribute. I try to contribute as a writer. I don't think of myself as Lester Bangs. I don't think of myself as T.S. Eliot or uh, Dashiell Hammett, or Ross McDonald or Chapman or anything. It's just not. I'm just a guy who has gotten better as a writer from doing it. Like anything in life, I got to be a better drummer just by drumming. It doesn't make me a great drummer or a great writer, but I'm better than I was. I was certainly better than I was when I was 7. I can spell enjoy now, ENJOY.
you're somebody who's put in your 10,000 hours, right? Plus.
Yeah, but
And
it's really just I love this stuff. Remember, if my first gig is XTC and Talking Heads, my idea of punk rock was far more open ended than just the Ramones. I thought Brian Eno's solo records were punk rock. I thought the Cramps were punk rock. The B-52s were punk rock. We didn't have this delineation into all these subgenres. I think that's the worst thing that's happened in the last 46 years to underground rock, is that we've cordoned off all these really interesting forms of expression within music. It's stupid. It's really stupid. Like the first time I heard Echo and the Bunnymen, I was still a pretty dedicated punk rocker, but I thought they were great. Even though no one called them punk rock, they still felt to me like they were part of our purview, that I could go see them at the Ritz and be excited.
there was a sensibility there of trying to do something new, of trying to maybe
Yeah,
push the boundaries
you
a bit.
weren't Styx, you weren't Kansas, you weren't Boston, you weren't Dire Straits. You were doing something wholly unique and challenging, and the lyrics were challenging, and your interviews were challenging, and you were part of this ultimate revolt against mass consumed lowest common denominator art crap. Not even just music, just art crap. Everybody trying to strip art out of its most fundamental, vital expression. For me, music is the most important art, but I like other forms of art too. And I gravitate towards the people who are the most honest, who are the most, fearless, and do art because they feel like it has to be done, not because, someone will rain hosannas on them, although that's always nice, or make a lot of money or be a celebrity, although those things can be very nice too. The point is that you make the art because you feel it inside and you want to express it. And music has always been my thing, so that's where I go. And so I do it in all these different ways. But like I said, the writing thing, the reason I continue to write is because nobody can stop me. My readers and my advertisers can stop me by not buying it anymore or not advertising. So far, they've declined to do that. Thank you. And I mean that sincerely. I'm not being flippant. Thank you to the readers and advertisers, because I've got nothing. I'm nothing if they don't buy it. Because as you say, I do it on my own. I print my own thing. I would have to go begging to other magazines, can I write for you? And I've never done that. All of my freelance writing is them coming to me and saying, we would like you to write for us.
And if I may, I mean, you used a really excellent analogy, the example of team sports. When I've looked at your website recently, there are so many individuals who contribute, whether it's features or reviews or interviews. It seems like there's a lot of people who, in whatever way, have, whether they've sort of grown up with the publication over the years or they're newer to it, they're eager to be involved in what you have helped to spread and to cultivate with your interests and your aesthetic or musical sensibility through the big takeover over the years.
It's a tried and true thing that if you do something for the love of it, you'll inspire others to want to do something similar. Not necessarily join you in your vocation, but I've heard people say, like, I got your magazine, and now I wanted to get more involved in this other thing I do that's not music.
Right.
That is always a good. That's a public good. My heroes, and I do have heroes. Vale is a hero of mine. It's not because he was a great writer. He was a very good writer, actually, but he wasn't like, God, this guy, I wish I could write as well as him. It was more just his taste, his attitude, his willingness to print stuff about bands I didn't know, or his open-hearted spirit, and his feeling that this was the real thing and everything else was kind of bullshit. And this is why I say it's bullshit, not just because I'm like, died and became king and I'm the taste, maker. Just like if you listen to this, you won't want to listen to that anymore. If you watch this, you won't want to watch that anymore, because this is so infinitely more challenging to you as a human being, instead of just leaving you basically on the couch with a bowl of potato chips, vegging out and never having any of your assumptions ever challenged. Life is better. It's actually better. Your life will be more vibrant. Your friendships will be better. Your meanings will be more deeper. I mean, why are we even here? I know our parents had sex. My children occurred because, their parents had sex. I'm not like, the Immaculate Conception. But apart from that, what's the purpose? Why did we bring children here? What is our purpose on this planet? Without getting, high mucky muck about it, the team sports aspect is where a lot of my meaning comes from. Like I got a bunch of people wishing me happy birthday today. If I was the biggest asshole in the world, they probably wouldn't. They must have gotten something out of my existing on this planet to be glad that I was born. I really feel that way. I feel that way about my friends. I feel that way infinitely about David Stein and Jeffrey Hutchinson. What would my life have been if they hadn't, made a damn gigantic point of it in bringing me along on this and not taking no for an answer, that they had stumbled on something that they needed me to be a part of.
They
Even though,
valued you as a person, and
I
I
guess,
think
yeah.
something that just comes through, if I may, in your writing and the kinds of work that you tend to gravitate towards. It is on the things that the indie and punk and maybe more alternative kind of contingents tend to do, is to place more value on those authentic, real relationships as opposed to strictly the transactional or strictly the commercial. Or because I was reading this book by Franz Nicolay from the Hold Steady. He wrote this really
Oh,
interesting book
yeah,
called Band People. And one of the recurring themes throughout that is, listen, if we were interested in making a ton of money, we would have completely been doing something else,
yeah,
right? Rather than this. So you have to think, why are you doing it? Why are you involved in it in any kind of capacity? And so enriched relationships with people, I think, as you're kind of speaking to here, really is a huge part of that.
yeah. I said this in another interview recently, that uh, almost all of my best friends I've made since high school, I made through music. Uh,
Absolutely.
5 or 6 girlfriends, my wife. Would I have met them without being the massive music fan that I am, of the type of music I am a fan of? And I think not. It's really, especially you get out of high school and college, it's hard to meet people. People complain about this all the time, of how they never had any problem getting a date until they got out of college. And then there's no longer this massive pool of people around you of a similar age and similar interests. And people stop listening to music because it's no longer this massive way of signaling their identity, even if it's terrible music. You know, life changes when you get to be an adult. Mine never changed. I just met new people all over the world. You know, there's 14 or 15 countries I have a offer to stay in their houses. I've never even been in those countries. Maybe they'll regret it if I ever come to visit them. Oh, why did I invite that jerk? But you know, I think there's something like 9 children that exist or something like that. I don't know. I think it's 9 marriages and 3 children. I keep forgetting the number of people who say they met because they were both big Takeover fans. And I'm like, well, how could that happen? Why would the magazine even come up? And like, well, I was reading at a cafe someday and this girl comes over. I mean, how hard is it to even meet girls outside of college, right? And the girl comes over like, you know that magazine? I love that magazine. And then 3 years later, they're married. I mean, if I never existed, would there have been some other mechanism that might have brought them together? And if they had kids, would those kids have ever come into the world? You know, it's more profound than I really want to make this, but there's all kinds of good things that can happen if you try to contribute in a team way. And the punk rock thing was a completely team-oriented experience. You'd go backstage and you'd meet Joe Strummer backstage, and he wouldn't lord over you that he was like the rock god. He'd be just like, "Wow, man, what do you think?" And I'd say like, "Hey, I saw that you covered, you know, this song by the this band or that group, or I saw you mention in this interview that you like this band, and so I went and bought their record. And Ben, you were right; those guys are great." You know what I mean? And you do that when you just get started talking to people, and you're like, "Well, what else should you recommend, since your track record is so good?" You know, like,
Got then something coming at you that you would not have had otherwise. And in whatever small way from that, your life is
yeah,
rather different. And who can predict how that's going to go years later? The fact that you're having a conversation about something like this with a stranger
yeah,
vis-a-vis this new interwebs technology. I'm from the part of Canada where I noticed back in spring of 2023, you had Sloan on your cover. And I
fantastic.
was like, yes, because even though they've been based in Toronto for most of their existence as a band, they started out in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I grew up in that region, right? I grew up in New Brunswick. I am in New Brunswick now, which is just one province over. And I lived in Halifax for a couple of years in the 90s, which would have been roughly concurrent with when They were doing their kind of early, when they were still being sort of pigeonholed as a grunge band and, things like this, when they were getting started with Murder Records and everything. And so I saw that on your website, and I just some of your social media at the time, and I'm like, yes, because Sloan, I mean, it's like, it's weird, but just people from my area, of my general kind of late Gen X cohort, it's one of those bands that we think of them as being our own, right? And
Oh, they're
so
incredible, aren't they? And have been
they
all.
really are.
They've never stopped being incredible. You
They are just
know,
remarkably consistent. They continue to evolve. They're
yeah.
cool as hell as people.
I've
And
interviewed them 4 times now.
4 times,
Yeah.
that's something right amazing in and of itself. I noticed your March 9th, the latest issue or the latest radio show you did, you played one of their tunes off their most recent release,
No
right?
surprise. To the surprise of no one.
Well, it's cool though, because the sensibility of, you look at what those guys are into, and it's not just kind of Beatlesque, intelligent bopple melodies. I mean, they go pretty deep into hardcore and some of these more esoteric directions themselves, and
Yeah,
they just have flawless execution, amazing melodies. They
great
continue to
lyrics
grow as
too.
songwriters, completely independent. They don't do, it seems like, pretty much anything they don't want to from a promotional standpoint at all.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of these things where,
Yeah, they're an embodiment of what we've been talking about. They're
exactly so,
they're an exemplar. To a
really,
T
it's
for what, 34 years now?
something
Same
like
same
that.
4 guys, not even a lineup change.
That's right.
They release their own records, they record their own records. I mean, you don't have to do that to fit in with my parameter, but the idea is that they do what they want. They make music because they like to make it. They're creative and restless spirits and try out different things, so they don't just keep making the same record over and over.
They're
And
challenging.
And despite being a legacy band that plays festivals in Western Canada so they can fund what they do, and fair enough, because their old songs are fantastic.
Yep.
What I like to listen to, and most Sloan fans will agree with me, is I tend to like to listen to their most recent records in any given time. I would have told you that in 95. I would have told you that in 07. I tell you that now. The recent Sloan records are the ones I listen to. And that is how it should be.
They're challenging themselves. They're challenging their audience,
Yeah, and
and they're doing it
people
on
like
their own
hearing their
terms.
recent records live too. It's fine if they want to
Absolutely.
go out and play one of their old albums start to finish, as they often do, but I'm just as happy, sometimes even happier, to hear their great new tunes. I'm disappointed we're not going to see the current album being played here, but that's our president's fault, and that means
They've made
that's
an
our
intentional decision
yeah,
not
that's our
to.
fault. Well, at least 70 million of us or whatever who have their ass in their head who voted for this.
I just moved to within, a mile and a half of the U.S. border for the first time in my life, right next to Calais, Maine, and I can look across the river of the downtown that I live in this area, and I can see over into the United States, and I just go, that's Trump and everything that you're hearing about in any given news cycle or whatnot. It's just, it looks like more of New Brunswick, and yet it
Yeah,
couldn't be more different culturally than what we've seen over within the past decade, minus the Biden years, right?
yeah,
So
and that's
that's
probably rural Maine too, so it's more likely to be Trump supporters. But you know, we shouldn't go down there because it's too much of a downer. But yeah, that's just another place where there's even small ramifications that we've done to ourselves by putting in, this person as our leader, and we're responsible. We're accountable for that, even if we didn't vote for him. So I'm just continuously embarrassed. And I even wrote Chris Murphy and said, yeah, I would do the same. And we did this to ourselves. You didn't do it to us. So
and
don't
I
don't come
absolutely I
don't come.
absolutely won't bring it further than that in terms of that particular direction, but
But
I
it's
have to
relevant
say,
because they're a band, and I like music, and I love seeing them play. You can't
It's
never really divorce politics or sociopolitics from music, as people like to say, like shut up and play. Fuck you. Country Joe McDonald just died. Did he shut up and play? No, I don't think so. Even though a lot of his songs were love songs. I played one on my radio show today, in fact. Country Joe McDonald and the Fish love song, because he could do that too, much like Billy Bragg does. But yeah, we're all in this together. That's the team thing. And when it works well, we all help each other and we all feed off each other and we all inspire each other. Unfortunately, our current administration is every man for himself, Lord of the Flies, and somebody else is hurting you and you're a victim. And it's the absolute opposite of what I've based my life on and my work on, if we can call it work. My output, I think, is probably less self-congratulatory. My output has been, the opposite of that attitude, and that draws me to a band like Sloan. They're the ultimate teamwork. 4 guys sharing the songwriting all along since day one, sharing the publishing. This is really healthy. It's why they've stayed together and other bands have broken up, as they submerge the ego into what's best for the band.
Well, and that is probably, I think, one of the best ways I could think of to go out, because I've taken up way more of your time than what I may have anticipated here, Jack. It's your birthday, you have things going on,
I warned you I
but
was chatty.
this
You were
message,
properly warned.
this message of it's all, a team endeavor. It's about collaboration. It's about being independent. It's about doing things on your own terms. It's about refusing to just sort of accept whatever pop culture swap is making its way through the mainstream at any given moment. It's about finding your space and defining who you are, and hopefully connecting with others who have similar interests or can help you grow your perspective and your horizons, if you will.
And lead by
Jack,
example. Yeah.
exactly so. And so, folks, I could not be more pleased to have had this conversation with Jack, Mr. Rabid, the birthday boy, publisher of the Big Takeover magazine, which we'll be connecting to in all the ways that we can on our humble, meek Writers on Writing platform here. There'll be some contextualizing notes, there'll be some further web links. Jack, thank you so much for being with us today. I could not have asked for a better way to spend a rainy afternoon here in my part of Atlantic Canada. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's absolutely lovely to just chat with someone about this stuff. It's really fun.
Well, absolutely, anytime. Thanks a bunch. Thanks a lot for being here, whoever you are and wherever you are checking this out. And bye for now.